Title: The Night Hackers Turned Off the Lights. Brief video description: the terrifying true story of how hackers shut down parts of Ukraine's power grid in the middle of winter, and the cybersecurity investigator who helped expose a new era of warfare where entire countries could be attacked through a keyboard. What would happen if someone hacked your country's power grid? Not your Instagram, not your bank account, the actual electricity keeping your city alive. Imagine sitting inside your home during winter, and suddenly, the lights go out. Then the heating dies. Then the phones stop working. And somewhere hundreds of miles away, somebody is watching it happen on a computer screen. In December 2015, this stopped being science fiction, because for the first time in history, hackers successfully turned off the power to part of an entire country. And while most people had no idea what was happening, one cybersecurity investigator was quietly uncovering evidence that modern warfare had changed forever. That investigator was Robert M. Lee, and honestly, what he discovered terrified governments everywhere, because this wasn't just a blackout, it was a warning. Back in the early 2000s, most people still imagined cyber attacks as annoying internet crimes. Maybe somebody steals your password. Maybe a company loses customer data. Maybe a teenager in a hoodie defaces a website for attention. But behind the scenes, something much more dangerous was evolving. Governments had quietly started treating cyberspace like a battlefield. And unlike traditional warfare, cyber warfare had one terrifying advantage. You didn't need missiles. You didn't need tanks. You didn't even need soldiers crossing borders. All you needed was access. That's what made people like Robert M. Lee so important. Before becoming one of the world's most respected industrial cybersecurity experts, Lee served in the United States Air Force, specializing in cyber operations and threat analysis. And unlike most cybersecurity experts at the time, Robert Lee focused on something most people barely understood: industrial control systems. The invisible computer systems controlling power grids, water plants, oil pipelines, factories, transportation systems, basically, the machinery keeping modern civilization alive. And Robert Lee understood something terrifying long before the public did. If hackers ever figured out how to weaponize those systems, cyber attacks would stop being digital problems. They'd become real-world disasters. At first, that idea sounded exaggerated, paranoid even. Then, Ukraine happened, and suddenly, the entire world started paying attention, because the digital world was about to become physical. To understand why this attack mattered so much, you need to understand the atmosphere surrounding Ukraine in 2015. The country was already under enormous pressure. Russia had annexed Crimea the previous year. Conflict in eastern Ukraine was escalating. Political tension between Russia and Ukraine had become explosive. And somewhere in the middle of all that geopolitical chaos, another battlefield quietly opened online. At first, Ukrainian companies noticed strange activity inside their systems: suspicious logins, malware infections, unauthorized remote access attempts. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger global panic, yet. But cybersecurity researchers started noticing something disturbing. The attackers weren't behaving like ordinary criminals. They were patient, disciplined, strategic, like professionals mapping out critical infrastructure piece by piece. And one malware strain in particular began appearing more frequently: Black Energy. At first, it looked like another espionage tool, but investigators slowly realized something terrifying. This malware wasn't just designed to spy. It looked capable of helping attackers control industrial systems themselves, and that changed everything. Because suddenly, a horrifying question appeared. What if somebody wasn't trying to steal information? What if they were preparing to physically shut things down? And unfortunately, that question was about to get answered. Main event, December 23, 2015, just before Christmas. Temperatures across Ukraine were freezing, and then the lights started going out. Entire sections of the Ukrainian power grid suddenly shut down. Roughly 230,000 civilians lost electricity. At first, operators thought it might be a technical malfunction. Then they saw something horrifying. The cursor on their computer screens started moving by itself. Hackers had remotely taken control of the systems, and what happened next felt less like cybercrime and more like science fiction. The attackers remotely opened breakers inside electrical substations, one by one, substation after substation. Entire neighborhoods went dark in real time, and then things got worse. The hackers disabled backup power systems, corrupted firmware, destroyed files, even launched telephone denial of service attacks to stop customers from reporting outages. Imagine trying to call emergency services during a blackout, only to discover the attackers were already blocking the phone lines too. This wasn't random chaos. It was coordinated digital warfare, and somewhere inside the cybersecurity world, investigators realized they were witnessing something historic. For the first time ever, hackers had successfully used malware to disrupt a national power grid. The digital world had crossed into the physical world, and there was no going back. Suddenly, this wasn't about computers anymore. It was about civilization itself. And somewhere in the middle of all this, Robert M. Lee was helping investigate one of the most terrifying cyber attacks in modern history. While ordinary people saw a blackout, Lee saw a warning. Because this attack proved something governments desperately didn't want to admit. Critical infrastructure everywhere was vulnerable. The systems running Ukraine's grid weren't unique. Similar infrastructure existed all across the world: America, Europe, Asia. Which meant if hackers could shut down power in Ukraine, they could potentially do it elsewhere too. And honestly, that realization terrified cybersecurity experts far more than the blackout itself, because the lights eventually came back on. But the illusion of safety didn't. The world had just entered a new era. But the blackout itself wasn't the scariest part. It was how organized the attack looked. As investigators dug deeper into the operation, the situation became even more alarming. This wasn't the work of random hackers. The attack showed planning, patience, technical precision, deep understanding of industrial infrastructure. Everything pointed toward a highly sophisticated state-sponsored operation. And although attribution in cyber warfare is notoriously difficult, many cybersecurity experts and intelligence agencies linked the attack to Russian state-backed actors. Suddenly, countries all around the world started asking the same terrifying question. If hackers could remotely turn off electricity in Ukraine, what was stopping them from doing it somewhere else? Inside the cybersecurity community, the attack triggered a massive shift in thinking. Before Ukraine, many executives treated cybersecurity like an annoying IT expense. After Ukraine, people started realizing cyber attacks could create real-world human consequences. Hospitals, water systems, transportation networks, energy grids, modern civilization itself had become a attack surface, and most people had absolutely no idea. Robert M. Lee became one of the loudest voices warning governments and corporations that industrial cybersecurity could no longer be ignored. Because unlike stolen passwords or leaked emails, infrastructure attacks affect ordinary civilians, families, cities, entire countries. And once hackers start targeting infrastructure, the line between cyber attack and warfare starts disappearing very quickly. Long-term repercussions. The Ukraine power grid attack permanently changed cybersecurity, not because it caused the largest blackout in history, but because it proved something far more dangerous. Cyber warfare could now create physical consequences in the real world. After Ukraine, governments massively increased investments into critical infrastructure security. Power companies started reassessing vulnerabilities. Military agencies expanded cyber operations. And cybersecurity experts began treating industrial systems like frontline assets in modern warfare. But even today, many experts believe most countries still aren't fully prepared for a large-scale infrastructure cyber attack. That's the unsettling part. Because modern society depends on invisible systems most people never think about: electricity, Water, fuel, communications, all connected, all vulnerable. And people like Robert M. Lee became something humanity had never really needed before: digital first responders. The people standing between civilization and systemic collapse while everyone else goes about their day completely unaware. And honestly, that's the strange thing about cybersecurity. When it works, nobody notices. The lights stay on, the water runs, life continues normally. Nobody notices the disaster that never happened. But hidden underneath modern civilization, a silent war is happening every single day. Most people just never see it. The Ukraine blackout proved hackers could shut down electricity. But what happens when malware becomes so advanced, it starts sabotaging nuclear infrastructure itself? Because a few years before Ukraine, a mysterious cyber weapon quietly infected Iran's nuclear facilities. The code was so sophisticated that many experts called it the world's first true digital weapon. And when investigators finally uncovered who created it, the discovery changed cyber warfare forever. Because the next story doesn't begin with a blackout. It begins with a virus designed to sabotage a nuclear program from the inside.